and they understand that we're at the end of the current era's cycle. Food is the most important thing. If you don't have food, you don't have a civilization. So if you can control the food, you can literally control the birth of a new civilization. And that's what gives me so hopefulness. I can control my own food to a point. I can grow food like Celeste can. So we are part of that solution. And you should be too. Be very grateful and just start to learn as much as you can about growing food, raising animals, chickens, protein sources, fats, oils. You're going to need it all. But once you're able to produce that, you are part of the new world because you can control food also. That's the thing that's going to be the most highly controlled, not oil, not energy, not uranium. It's going to be food. And when you look at the media and the government behaving the way they do, you just understand they're pivoting. The more information they get, the more they need to pivot, but they need to distract the populace without causing a global panic before the actual real difficulties are here.
Hi, this is Celeste with the Celeste Report, and I have a good friend of mine, David DuByne from Adapt 2030, and let's bring David on. Hi, David.
Hey, great day. What's happening? I hope everybody's smiling and just enjoying another breath of existence on this beautiful blue planet while the madness occurs around us, because that madness, it's in your mind also. You can live whatever way you want while the world's crumbling. I'm choosing a happy day today. Hope everybody else is too.
Yes, we can choose our own reality.
Mhm.
Even when things are difficult and trying, we can still have joy and peace, enjoy the great outdoors or whatever we're doing at this time of the year. For me, it's a little icy out there, but so we've got what's on your mind with I sent you a couple documents from the United Nations. Let me get your thoughts on those.
Well, once I started looking at food and food sold by the molecule, by the calorie, by the atom, or whatever they have envisioned for us, I started to look at the Great Depression in food prices and the different types of commodities and everything that occurred during the Great Depression. And then I started looking at food price maximums all the way back to 1850. So if we're going to move into a new era of food pricing, we have to look through the past to see where the maximum prices were, because there's going to be some equivalent in the beginning, because they can't just bankrupt everybody and, make your food 20 times more expensive day one. Nobody can work into that. So it's going to be a gradual working in process. And that's how I was trying to connect those two worlds together.
Yeah, it's actually not. The UN wants to sell the food by the 1/1000th of a calorie.
That's insane. Like, how do you do that for take pricing? I'll use coffee, which has been 7 times higher price than it has now during the 1970s. Beef's been 2.5 times higher price than even our maximum prices right now. So if you're spending $10 a pound for some nice steaks or something, $25 a pound. Okay, now start dividing that by 1,000th and then charging. I mean, I'm trying to figure out where this work-in period is going to be, the rollover from central bank digital currency. So you can fractionalize something, and then you can fractionalize food as well by the molecule. But how long is that going to take to take somebody's mind from one used to be $1 divisible by 100 into 100 cents, so 1 penny, but then to fractionalize that into 1,000th of a cent, and then get that same mind frame over into food, because nobody in their right mind today is going to buy a hamburger by the 1,000th of a hamburger at a time. Like, to get that transition of the mind is the thing I can't work around. Like, how are they going to reprogram an entire generation or an entire world to get us to start consuming by 1,000th of a calorie at a time? Gold has soared past $2,000 an ounce. All-time record high prices, wars in Israel and Ukraine, rate cuts on the table, fueling gold's meteoric rise. And the gurus, Jamie Dimon of JP Morgan and Larry Fink of BlackRock, pointed out the similarities to the 1970s. Gold went from $158 an ounce in 1974 to $850 an ounce in 1980. Compare that with our national debt skyrocketing. There's a direct correlation to the national debt. The price of gold In 2020, the U.S. debt was 23 trillion and gold was 1,500 an ounce. Now it's 33 trillion in 2023 and gold is $2,100 an ounce. Call the proud Americans the Patriot Gold Group today before it's too late. Mention the Adapt 2030 channel. You're going to get some great in-class service. Also, Patriot Gold Group has a no fee for life IRA where your IRA or 401k can be in physical gold or silver. No fee for life IRA on qualifying rollovers. Give them a call, 888-546-7020. And also now for the 7th year in a row, Patriot Gold Group is Consumer Affairs top-rated IRA gold dealer. 888-546-7020. And now on with the video. You know, I'm looking at it. It's going to take 100 years of programming to get people to start thinking that way. Just to think that way. Not to accept it, but to get to thinking that way. The cryptocurrency is the best way. It's a great footprint in there, but I just can't see the world jumping into that system anytime soon. That's where I'm baffled. They're talking about implementation by 2030, and I'm like, whoa, you're going to take 100 years to implement this and change the mind of people. So that's my disconnect.
Okay, so how my take on it is that they started when they introduced GMO. So we were not getting the original product ever since GMO happened. I mean, unless you're doing heirloom and that type of thing. So then synthetic biology was a step further. So they can actually have like one molecule of or atom of nutrition, but the rest is image food. It's filler. It's synthetic. It may look like a hamburger, just like they've got the Impossible Burgers. It looks like a hamburger. It bleeds like a hamburger, but it's not a hamburger. And we're filled at the stores with junk food. Look at all the junk food. There's nothing in there. It's not real food. So I think that when we think, oh, they're going to break it down and like slice and dice down to a little nitty gritty, but I don't think that's the way it's going to happen. I think people have the expectation of a hamburger or a salad or whatever, but it's not going to be real. It's going to be synthetic. It's going to be things created in the laboratory because the UN put out, you cannot take anything from nature. So I think that that's how they're going to do it. So our mind sees the salad or the hamburger or the milkshake or whatever, but in reality, it's only for what it will do for your body, nutrition, minerals, whatever, all the different things, fiber. We're not going to have that.
Yeah, not being able to take anything from nature. I laugh at that too. And I'm just wondering how much of this is a psyop to get you just to agree that it's already done so you won't even protest or push back on it. Because out here where I live, unless you remove, everybody, there's going to be 0% of the people out here that would adhere to that and go, what do you mean? I can't go pick up hickory nuts. I got acorns out here. I got walnuts growing. I'm going to go pick what I want. It's my land. And you might say, well, they're going to remove everybody off and put the non-human habitation zones. Well, you know what? That is going to be a tooth and nail, house to house, room to room struggle to clear people out.
Yeah, I agree. I think some people have conceded already that they don't really care about real food. But then there's a large number of people, I think that started with the anti-GMO food that decided to take a stand for pure food. And so we're going to the labor and the trouble of collecting our seeds and growing our own seeds in good soil that we amend and then preserving it ourselves, and so that we can have good food and not participate in the system. But, even at the farmer's market, and I haven't been at the farmer's market for like 7 years now, but the last couple of years I was at farmer's market, people would look at my my canned pickles or my kosher dills or whatever, beef pickles, and they would shake their heads and they would turn their faces and they would shrug their shoulders and go, too much work. And it was like,
Mm,
"What? This
yeah,
is
too much
real
work.
food," you know? I'd much rather have something that I know what is in it than something that isn't.
Yeah, the reason I was like shuffling around here, these are the newest price lists from the Amish that I got because we get our cattle and our lamb from the Amish, and they grow heirloom variety corn and for their hogs as well. Heirloom variety corn on their own land. They graze those animals on their land without using pesticides in the fields. So when they're growing heirloom variety of corn, that some of it doesn't even exist anymore. It's just the species that survived through that's still grown in this area. Because you look at the amount of seeds that used to be thousands, plural, of types of corn species, and now it's kind of funneled down to about 15 or so.
Yeah.
But there's still a huge amount of those on the outside, like the Indian corn style, and they'll pull those different colored kernels out and they'll grow that in a patch as well. Hopefully it doesn't cross pollinate. But there's a huge amount of varieties of corn that you literally can't find anywhere else. It's just a regionally grown area of corn heirloom. So we do get our lamb, calves, and hogs there, and then we get everything smoked local from them as well, and they salt up the bacon and different thing. So lambs right now are going for $2.75 a pound live weight, and calves right now $1.60 live weight, and hogs are $1.40 a pound live weight. Now that's at the one that's closest to us, but then you go 30 minutes away, and those same prices there. If you're looking at pork, they're trying to get about $2.05 versus $1.40, and then the lamb on itself there, if we're looking with $2.75 at the closest farm to us, they're trying to get $3.15. This is the same two Amish farms, all heirloom, all same, but 30 minutes different. You're getting that price range there. So the whole thing with me specifically is how contaminated the meat supply is out there.
Yeah.
Out in the supermarket world, it would be, I think it's nigh impossible to find a piece of clean meat. Now you can agree or disagree with me, but they don't do anything with their cattle. They don't their cattle, they don't their sheep, they don't need it. And I think it's some of the cleanest meat on the planet, minus what's floating down in the air, which you and I have talked about before with the persistent contrails and geoengineering programs ongoing. But the one thing I want to say with this timeline of everything moving out, since I started the Adapt 2030 channel, it was forecast that we would come into significant, massive, gargantuan crop yield losses around 2023 to 24, where the world would be very aware that the food's getting incredibly expensive, less available, and they're going to start looking for answers. Now, suddenly we have all these wars popping off, the supply chains are starting to break down, and we're looking at an economic collapse inbound, all in the same exact years, coming off of this solar maximum into the solar minimum, bringing us into a 400 to 2,000 year low in solar activity. So if you don't know your local area farmers and you're not in the farmers market, and you're not growing anything, you are at an incredible disadvantage. And the people at the UN, they're going to take advantage of you. They're not there to help humanity. They're there to enslave humanity and have enforcers to do it. So, I mean, that's kind of my, quick take on everything. If any blue helmets come through, you definitely don't want to take their handouts. You don't want anything to do with them. You want them off your land.
Yeah, I think we also have to be concerned about our own federal government, not only blue helmets, and really even I I am in the middle of farming country in North Dakota, thousands and thousands of acres. Of course,
But
it's
it's
all
all GMO, isn't it?
yeah, it's GMO, synthetic biology. Um, but I live in a town of 49, and to be honest, the rules in this town of 49, you can't have chickens, you're not supposed to have a dog, you can't go off your property, you can't I mean, it's like, I might as well be in Berlin in the middle of World War II. And they must have come in, either the federal government or the UN, under these ICLEI partnerships and different things, and got them to put these rules in because they've been on the books for a good long time to prevent you from growing your own food. And it just, I mean, it's I don't even know how to explain how weird it is to live in these thousands of acres of farm country, and if the apocalypse came, I would not even be able to eat anything here, nothing, that was growing here. It's kind of ironic and sad, very sad.
Well, it just comes back to me, like, I just don't know how they can prevent people from wild foraging or wild foraging medicines, medicinals, or edibles. I mean, that is a 0% possibility that can actually enforce that. So I'm wondering how you think they might be able to enforce it. Like they're going to come to my house like, oh, we know you picked an acorn up in the forest. You got 2 of those black walnuts. We see they came from that tree up there. LiDAR sweeping says you have them in your house. Like that's how they realistically, I think there's no possibility for them to enforce a no taking anything off of your own land.
So this is how I see the scenario playing out. So in the first convention of biodiversity, I went to that site and it said that they were going to be putting these genetically modified organisms out there in over all the forests, all the land. And so I think that that's how they're going to do it is put poisons, toxins, glyphosate. And so, yes, you can eat it just like you can eat a deer that has chronic wasting disease. But if you eat it, it's a very slow and agonizing death because it makes your brain like Swiss cheese. So I think that they're not going to have boots on the ground, people knocking at your door saying, you got a fistful of blueberries. I think they're just going to poison it, and we've seen that. I mean that's because it's not feasible. They don't have enough troops to come to all of our houses at one time. But if they just poison the area with whatever, there's many chemicals out there. They could put different chemicals in different places. And I don't know about you if you're getting emails about this, but I'm getting emails that a lot of people are noticing like stationary drones over their property or their houses, especially in the East, kind of near where you live. So I don't know. Have you heard of anything like that?
No, never have. Uh, haven't. Well, there's military traffic that goes over because Watts Bar is a nuclear facility that's like 50 miles from here. So they do a lot of training runs, and there's always something in the air around here.
Mhm.
What I have noticed moving from the C-130s that generally come buzzing down the valley, I've seen a lot more Blackhawks and like Chinooks and a lot of helicopter traffic as of late. When I say as of late, I'm talking the last 60 days, the last couple months. Very noticeable because we're spending more time outside because we're trying to build a few things and get the gardens taken care of, winterizing things out in the field. Like after our talk here, I'm going to be bush hogging the backfield. But spending more time outdoor, it's much more noticeable that there's that. But I haven't seen any drones as such. But I will comment on that. There's a program out there that I'd done a video on maybe a couple of years ago called the Barcode for All.
Yes.
And
Yes.
yeah, and then what they were doing was mapping out and genetically mapping 10 million species of plant, animal, insect, and then they were going to digitize that database and then claim ownership over it. And then you would have to try to or be forced to pay a usage fee. So they were going to use LiDAR and go over your property or mine, get a specific density of trees, and they'll know how many hickory trees there are, or how many ash trees, or how many whatever maple trees. And then if they notice there's a difference the following year when they go over it again, and there's a tree that disappeared that might have been cut down, then you're going to have to pay a usage fee for that, where you'll be charged by using the wood on your property from them surveying through satellites. Now that's at the maximum apex of where they want to take it. So between now, where they're just mapping this species, and in the interim, where they're going to claim all species ownership as theirs, and to that end goal where if you take a twig off the tree, you're going to have to pay a usage fee for that, kind of like the subscription model, where you might have 50 acres, but every tree that's cut or used or satellite map, that pine tree that fell down last year that you just used for like hot firewood out in the front field, you have to pay by the square foot for that wood that we saw is no longer there, that obviously didn't rot and decompose during a certain amount of time, that was cut and removed from the property. That's their ultimate goal there. Imagine a subscription model on every breath you take. That's insane. But that Barcode for All project is ongoing and has been, and they're still mapping species out. So a lot of this kind of crosses over into what you were talking about.
Yeah, I first ran across that a long time ago. I did an
Yeah.
interview with David Eyeball and Cobol, And so I'm going to bring something up that I just found out and I couldn't believe it. And as a farmer, you're going to be interested in this. So in 2005, at the same time they introduced the National Animal Identification System, the Congress introduced a bill that the National Weather Service could not issue anything except severe weather warnings. And I thought, well, that's really kind of interesting. So, you know me, I dug down the rabbit hole some more and I found out that then IBM bought up many of the weather channels that we watch, or we get on our phones and we go, what's the weather going to be? So we go to Weather Channel. Most of those were bought up by IBM. IBM. And I go, I don't like the sound of that. I mean, I think of IBM like Bayer, Either one I don't want anything to do with. And then they just sold the company, IBM just sold the weather channels to this firm just north of San Francisco for an undisclosed amount, but they are adding some value added products to your weather. So now you not only get your weather, is a storm coming? Am I going to have rain, snow, sunny day, whatever? They also tell you if you're going to get a cold, like in your area. It's specific. And the reason I caught it was I went to look at the weather like less than a week ago, and it said you have a severe likelihood of getting a bad cold, but you only have a 30% chance of getting the influenza. And then it said your arthritis, if you have a 20% chance of having a arthritis inflammation flare. And it was very specific. It went on, and that's what this company is doing. But how and why is our physiology associated with the weather? Or is this part of this unveiling that we're seeing when IBM bought the company, and then now it's bought with somebody else and they're value adding it?
Depends if they're including space weather and effects from space weather.
Well,
The
but
magnetosphere has definitely declined another 5% or so, even since the last, but they were saying it was declining 5% per decade. But I'm saying right now, along with a few others, that we're clipping along much faster than 5% per decade, maybe even 1% per year now. And you notice even the smallest of the CMEs, and that last one, the Halo CME that came in with the solar wind pointing toward Earth. I mean, how much did the media run for 2 straight weeks about that story? Like, oh, there's this, the power grids are going to go down, electric lines are going to fry, your internet's going to be out for weeks or months, all because of the solar wind and a possible CME coming in. They're very mappable effects with heart arrhythmias and strokes, etc., when there are higher, KP indices or a KP index and different types of, CMEs coming in. And there was an orange aurora last time. Orange.
yes.
Now, they try to explain it that's an overlapping of green and red, perfectly aligned, and that's why you see orange. But in reality, any artist would know green and red turns into brown. So I mean, how does they can't even explain the coloration correctly? I think it's different atoms that are actually morphing and interacting to create a new type of atomical bond that's effervesces with that orange. That's the only way I can look at it. Higher energy levels coming in. They're seeing those auroral ropes all over the place now, and our atmosphere is so much more highly electrified. So now for them to come in and saying, hey, you might have this arthritis, hey, you might have this. I was working on an app with somebody, and we were trying to overlay the KP index, the Schumann resonance, and the moon phase, because we were looking at it from like entrepreneurs trying to see which types of day we could have. If you're going to get if tomorrow these 3 indices are lined up like a KP6, new moon, and the Schumann's at like regular near 8 on the resonance, then you're going to have this kind of day. If you get a KP1 and the Schumann's booming at 30 and you're at full moon, you're going to have a completely different type of day. So we're trying to overlay these different factors in on energetics outside our Earth that are affecting our Earth to try to determine what type of day we would have for productivity. And if you knew you might be lazy, a way to overcome that in the morning, because I know when there's significant solar storms, I get kind of just lethargic and want to do a lot of research, but not really produce a lot of content. But on the inverse, when it's a very low KP index, I just get super energized because all that extra energy that's overflowing now wants to come out of me. Where when it's really heavily energized, it's like keep that energy in and not try to put it out. I don't know. I figured out a lot of my things by my own solar wind, solar activity, KP index, Schumann resonance, and moon phase myself. That's why the whole thing about trying to put the app together. But for them to come out now, which means that the solar activity is starting to have such a great effect on humanity that we are absolutely needing to explain it now more to people, which was, part of the plan anyway. That was part of the forecast coming in with changing frequency off the sun as we step down out of this into a grand solar minimum, that there would be massive effects in terms of magnetic field line disturbances and changes to look for more straining of animals, earlier season blizzards and earlier cold to come in with winters hanging on longer, deeper into the spring. That's why we're getting a lot of late season winter freezes after everything's budded out and blossomed out, and you get like 2 of massive freeze. Everything's budded out. It's been warm for 3-4 weeks. The blossoms are coming out, and then whoosh, you'll get hit something like an 18-degree low front that'll come through for 2 days, and then those buds and blossoms are destroyed.
Yeah.
But this was all part of it, that human behavior would be different. Humans would migrate. Governments would change the way they oversee citizens, and the economy was going to constrict and then have to restructure itself. Now we got the human domain right in with the economic domain and the governmental military domain all starting to overlap, where a lot of things need to be explained right now because there's so many changes happening so fast. The only way you cannot panic a planet is to try to explain through something that they already understand. Like to explain a grand solar minimum that would come into these 400-year or 2,000-year cycles that reset everything. That's not a very good sell. They tried it with the Great Reset and Klaus Schwab and everything, and everybody was instantly like, no, push back. Now it comes, whether you really don't have a choice. The sun's changing its frequency. We can say these, the bad boogeymen from 007 are doing some stuff over here. Yeah, they are. They're riding on top of the natural cycle for a greater outcome. But in reality, this grand solar minimum was going to come smashing through our society anyway, and we were going to have to deal with it. I just wish they would have given us more time, but now they're trying to sell us food by the molecule, which is, it's a taking over of the human to turn it into another species. So I was having a conversation, we look at Denisovans in the past, and we look at Neanderthals in the past, and then we come into this, what we consider modern sapien. Like 60,000 years from now, they're going to look at us and go, we are the last of a species that transitioned during this time into a new species. In the fossil record, we're going to come up with something different, no different than a Neanderthal. Maybe everybody that survives this is going to be a 3-foot tall humanoid or a human. And only the very, very smallest of people are going to survive through this because they'll require even less resources. They won't need as much food. They won't need as much water. And perhaps 60,000 years from now, they'll talk about us as being the giants. They talk about Denisovans being 8 foot tall, Neanderthals being 7 feet tall. We're 6 feet. So 50,000 years from now, they're going to look at us and go, those 6 foot tall giants that roamed the planet. That's us. So we're definitely at the cusp of something. And I know I rambled there for a second, but I know you always have a response. I'll let you go.
Well, it's just like plants. I live in a cold area, and when it's colder than normal, the plants hug the ground because they need to conserve their energy. And that's going to be for all biological life. Because not only is it the grand solar minimum, we're headed towards snowball Earth. We're not going to see snowball Earth, but the planet itself has gone through cycles of where the whole Earth is encased in ice. And so it is going to get colder. So I've recommended people, I don't care if you live in Arizona or Mexico, get at least a coat and some mittens and a hat so that you can survive. So I just got to tell you about my new grow system. Have you ever looked at the Vivo Sun?
Mm-mm.
Oh, it's I wish I could take my camera in there, but I can't. So it's Vivo Sun. You can see it on Amazon if you want. And it's a total grow system. It has a filter, it has the fans, it has it's all the lights, and it's programmable. So for every stage, like germination, growing plants, mature plants, and flowering plants, you get a full spectrum LED light. And it's so exciting. I mean, I've got this thing, it comes in different sizes. I got the 4x4, and I'm so impressed with the quality. I
Mm.
haven't seen quality like this in probably 20 years in any product that I bought. They've thought of everything. I opened this one box, like the last box, and I go, "What's in this box?" And it came with a trellis, 3 grow bags, plant stakes, trellis, and garden gloves. Just all the little things. I mean, they thought of everything, and it's just package deal. You wanna grow in your living room when it's hostile outside. You know, you can have your leafy greens. You can I bought myself 3 citrus trees, and so it's gonna be fun, and I put it in the living room, so it's right outside the broadcasting studio, right outside in the living room, and then I can see it from my dining room, so I get the outdoor experience even though I live in North Dakota. So I think that that's, even though we're running into some challenging times, there's some really neat technology coming out.
But like the things are forecastable, like energies are forecastable. That's the whole thing. Yeah, we're going ahead and do an ice age. We're at the end of the interglacial. That's forecastable too. But the
Mhm.
speed at which it happens is not. There's a lot of things stepping off. And, the speed at which we thought this world was going to collapse is also way off on a lot of people's timelines, including my own. I thought we would have been well into uh, re-emerged economy cusping on CBDCs by now. The way it was, if you would have looked at the world 2 years ago, you would have thought we were on the edge of it collapsing and they're going to have these CBDCs rolled out. Everybody would have had the digital wallets by now. We would have been on rationing by now because of the supply chain lockups on purpose. But it's just like we keep getting strung down the road a little more, a little more, a little more, a little more stress, a lot more stress, a little more angst, a little bit more unknown. And I don't know if this thing's going to continue for the next 5 years and no shoe's ever going to drop, but it's going to be this slow transitional thing versus like kind of a bigger event a lot of people have been looking for. I don't know. You have a lot of knowledge on that where I don't.
Yeah, it was funny. So last year, when I came to visit you, people were actually mad at me because I came on that trip, and they said the end of the world's in September, the end of the world's in October, the end of the world's in November, and you just have to, I don't live by that anymore. I just want to enjoy every day. Yeah, I work really hard, but I want to enjoy every day, and I'm not going to worry about, yeah, there's dire predictions here and there, and I see trends. Like in these reports that I sent you from the FAO, it does say that they are going to start rationing food, and they're going to give the most food to the kids, and you're going to get less food as you get older. Of course, like you and I, we know how to grow food, so we're not going to be impacted. But you think about the people, the younger, maybe 50-year-olds. I don't know how old you are, David. So I guess I speak for myself.
I'm a
Um,
whippersnapper.
you're a whippersnapper?
Yeah.
Okay, well, you know how to grow food, but there's some young people that they really believe that the food comes from the grocery store, Costco, or the fast food
Mm.
place or whatever. They've totally lost their agrarian roots. So do you think that the how accurate do you think that the Farmer's Almanac is? That was the standard for all the farmers back in the day.
Well, gardening with the moon, I met some old timers. This got to be 10 years ago. And these guys were like in their 90s and they wrote a book called Gardening with the Moon. And I caught up with them at this Granger Tomato Festival here in East Tennessee. Well, anyway, I didn't know anything about gardening with the moon. And, a lot of that stuff that you find in the old Farmer's Almanac and the Farmer's Almanac is based on lunar cycles, when to plant, that sort of thing. Like when you want to prune, if the moon's coming off of full and going down, the water is trying to come out of the plant. So if you prune something when the moon's going from full down to new moon, there's a very good chance it won't grow back. But if you prune something right at the new moon when it's growing, you're just going to like, why does this thing keep growing back? It's the same way with planting too. If you're trying to plant off the full moon going down to the new moon, you're going to get spindly root growth, and you're not going to do as well as if you waited for that cycle of the moon to go new moon, wait 2 days, plant. I mean, and a lot of that stuff is based on old kind of, knowledge of things like that that has been lost. I don't know if they can really ping the weather. Yeah, you could look for the woolly caterpillars. And here where I live, they say how many days of fog in July and August in the valley in the mornings when you wake up is how much snowfall you're going to get later on in the year. I mean, everybody's got their own metric. Are the yellow jackets down right near the or the wasp is down right at the ground level with their nests, or they're higher up in the trees. There's a million of those old, old kind of methodologies to see how brutal a winter will be. But I'm just very unsure anymore, especially with the technologies available to our fingertips for the nefarious on bending weather systems with the, heating in the ionosphere.
Yeah.
There's a huge amount of unknowns now. The technology is so far more advanced than they are letting on into what you consider, the movies or into the daily programs. Like they're really 50 to 100 years ahead of anything that you think is like, wow, super futuristic. Add 50 to 100 years from that. And that's where we sit with the abilities to generate or bend weather, stop weather, create hot spots to make things flow around. Like a lot of these droughts, it is really within my thinking that the ionospheric heater is blasting that area, causing that spot. So weather patterns are continually bending around it for months on end, months on end. And with this created weather and these created droughts and these created floods, I mean, seeding, we see the cloud seeding all the time. You can't tell me that doesn't have an effect of precipitation and cloud droplet formation in itself. Especially, luckily we're at cosmic rays are at a lower point because we're into right at solar maximum, which by the way is 3 years early. But as soon as we come off that and we come down into low solar activity, like the solar low, the low in the 11-year solar activity, solar minimum, and then we hit that and we're going even lower into a 400-year of low solar activity, like the amount of cosmic rays that are going to come blasting in through our atmosphere and creating clouds is going to be, we're going to have mega floods.
Yeah.
And you got the nefarious riding on top of that. So who knows what they can do or how refined the science is to truly manipulate weather at this moment. Because what I'm seeing out there is for sure not natural. You can say, yeah, there's big changes or big cycles. I understand that. But whatever it is so targeted. And you've done many a show on talking about owning the weather and these things by 2025. We're already there for sure.
Yes.
And I think the tech is way more highly advanced than anybody is allowing us to see, at least in the public arena.
Yeah, I think the only thing that's keeping them, kinda at bay is they really wanna keep this climate change, climate warming, agenda, narrative going. And so in a way, that's kinda holding back the technology that they have. But at some point, like you said, we're in this solar cycle, the magnetosphere, many changes in on the sun and our solar system that we're gonna get ducked, and they're not gonna be able yeah, they've created I don't like all the particulates in the sky. I know that don't have as many particulates as we have here, but with so many, and then when the cosmic rays do come, it's not gonna be a good situation.
Yeah, I'll just say you trigger me on an idea because of that. Also, there's different layers of this onion that I learned about many years ago. What you see up there in the plains, the persistent contrails, okay, everybody's pointing to that thing and say, it's strontium, barium, aluminum, whatever in the atmosphere, persistent, stratospheric, aerosol, geoengineering. And, those programs, which used to be conspiratorial, are now, hey, we do that. We change the weather. Hey, that's normal. We've been doing this for years. We've been doing it for decades. So what do and now when you look at it, they're still doing it. But cosmic radiation management is the original layer base for that. The second layer underneath it that the public sees or understands is the geoengineering. The basis for this program to start in the beginning, as far as my knowledge from those who write about this, was that they understood the cosmic ray impact and it was going to create 7 times more cloud cover than we have right now. Now, put that in perspective for a second. You're talking about storms that are going to be 7 times more intense, rainfalls that would be 7x in some places where the cloud cells are bunching in on themselves and the way the jet streams were bending, where you get these focal areas, and they called it a river from the sky, where you're getting all three of these parameters ripping in on themselves and just like squeezing out like a sponge, a river from the sky. They were talking once in thousands of years flood, like once in a 3,000 year flood type of thing. So the original intent with the program, the benefit for them was they got to control the weather, or at least they had a substrate up there to control and be able to heat. That was the benefit. The original program was all based around cosmic radiation management. And this is the simplest way to sum it up. They're originally trying to spread the metals up there. And when cosmic rays would come in and then collide with one of those nanoparticulate metals in the sky, it would lose its charge and it wouldn't be able to pinball down and then create the clouds. That was the whole purpose of the program originally. They understood this back in the 50s. We were coming into some incredible cycle here with magnetospheric disruptions, Earth's magnetic field disruptions, lowering magnetic fields, cosmic rays coming in. And the guy who really broke it out was Heinrich Svensmark. Once he did the cloud mystery, they could no longer cover it up because he could replicate the experiments. Then they jumped from, oh, it would only increase clouds a little bit, to, oh, whoa, he can replicate again and again that there's a 7x increase in the clouds and the droplet particulates, or the droplets that are forming off the particulates pinballing through with a charge on that particle, and they could no longer cover it up. And he's really the one that broke it. And they tried to smash him. They removed his funding. They kicked him out of the laboratories. And this is all over in Europe. You can check out Heinrich Svensmark. Great. And then he wrote the Chilling Stars is another one that goes into Earth's magnetic field changes and how the sun will affect our climate. He got it hit so bad that they removed his articles, took away his funding, kicked him out of the university, kicked him out of the lab. So he had to get private funding and go set up his own lab outside of the university sphere anywhere, created his own laboratory. And then it's like, I can recreate those experiments. And he started to do these experiments in cloud chambers and showing the amount of rain droplets that were formed by it. But once he could replicate it in again and again and again and again, every single condition, then the cat was out of the bag. They could no longer cover it up. And at that point, then you know what happened? They started really coming clean at the same time. You see that overlap of narratives of, yeah, geoengineering is real. Yeah, we can do it. We can bend the ionosphere. Yeah, we can do all these types of things. It's up there. And there's nothing you can really do about it except go protest at an airport or something. But that rollover of the awareness of the cosmic radiation management aspect of that entire program was blended in with the sudden runaway, hey, geoengineering is real. There's chemtrails, there's this, there's that. Don't look at Svensmark's work, because that's what they were really trying to stall. And I'm not going to say prevent, I'm going to say stall, was by putting all those metals up there to nullify the charge of the cosmic rays coming in. Now, that was at the low of solar activity. You got to go back about 10 years. Now we're at the high point of solar maximum rolling right now, which is 3 years early, by the way, for anybody keeping tabs out there. We weren't supposed to start come rolling into solar maximum until like 2027, according to the experts. But anybody following the grand solar minimum and these larger changes, this is going to be a very short one. It's going to drop off a cliff. And when it drops off the cliff and we start, there's no more protection of our magnetosphere from a very impactful sun, we're going to start getting hit by these cosmic rays. They bought themselves a decade or so of the worst effects by this cosmic radiation / geoengineering program. And as it was stated, if they stopped at a solar minimum, we would see biblical floods that would change the world. And there was no way around salvaging our planet at that point, because the rainfalls were going to be so intense, so all-encompassing, that what we know as agriculture would be not viable in the way we understand it today. The fields would always be too muddy to plow in. They would always be too late or too early on that planting and harvesting dates, because the mud would come in. It was a mud. That was the biggest thing, was to always be muddy at the harvest time. Now we're at the solar maximum, and we're going to repeat this dropping off into solar minimum. And then what? Are they going to have to ramp the program up to a 10x now because our magnetosphere is weakened so much and our sun's stepping down into a 400-year low? This is the kind of thing that's overlapping too much. That really kind of, now they're at the point where the economy is at the end. We're getting into the crop losses already. They can't explain why the yields are down. They can try to lie on the carryover stocks, but then the next year you can look at the numbers didn't match up with their carryover forecasts. And like, whoa, 200 million tons of something just disappeared out of last year. Like, where did 200 million tons of grain go to? These are the kind of things that are not talked about. The yields are significantly down.
Yes.
And now what? We got the wars raging in Ukraine. We got the wars going to be raging all across all the grain belts here, Kyrgyzstan, Kazakhstan, Russia. And, they're trying to explain away all these crop losses.
Well, you mentioned the biblical proportion flood, so I got to
Absolutely.
insert a little biblical. So it says when Jesus is supposed to return, that it will be as in the days of Noah. And what was that like? So it had not rained upon the face of the earth at Noah's time. The clouds covered the whole face of the earth, but it didn't rain until Noah's time. And then, of course, we all know it flooded. I mean, every culture, the Chinese culture, many cultures talk about this flood that happened at that particular time. So there's a biblical reference or kind of a foreshadowing that we should pay attention to, just like it says, let's see, red skies in the morning, sailors take warning, red skies at night, sailors delight. We say those things glibly or we hear them, but they're real and we should be paying attention to them because it's ancient knowledge, like about the petroglyphs, and that the ancients tried to warn us in their petroglyphs or hieroglyphs about the changes in the plasma, the electrical charge of the earth, the lightning. Now, lightning as we knew it always came from the sky down. And now we're starting to hear of many, many more instances where it's going straight up. Yeah. Yeah. So we live in this very amazing time. And it's not anything it's a struggle. Yes. Could it get us down? It could if we let it. Is it a lot of work? Yes. But I think we really need to stay away from the fear factor and just realize that we're here because this planet has been through some real heavy duty things. They didn't quite have the technology that maybe they did. I mean, we both know about the Tartarian.
Maybe they did.
Yeah, and the megalithic structures. So we don't know. We don't know, really.
Yeah, and let me wind that back to the beginning of the program here. Food is going to get really expensive and very not nearly at the quantities that we appreciate and are so blessed with today. So if you see international government organizations want to take control of the food supply, you can now understand why. It is all natural cyclicity coming in with this, layering of different effects from the same root cause of the changes in our sun. Now, please remember, it's not just the sun is changing. It is connected to a Birkeland current flowing far away from our own star that is changing the inbound current flow into the plasma sphere around our sun. It is not just this solar system and this star that is affecting. It is things further afield. Mm-hmm. And now with the new discoveries, if you've seen the new James Webb telescope, they looked into Sagittarius A, which is the black hole, and it is a glowing orb. It's not black. It's not sucking light in that nothing can escape that they've taught us. It's a glowing orb. And I look at it and I'm just fascinated, like a glowing orb of consciousness through the center of our galaxy, like blasting a wave pattern out. Like the electrical frequency, many steps down through the spiral arm of our galaxy, way far from our star, light years away, is also changing. And that current flow into our star is the result of these electromagnetic changes through the entire galaxy and our local regional star system. And this is why the ancients, what you might consider mystical weirdness of them looking out at, Sirius A and looking at Dogon and, looking out at the Orion with the things with the pyramid, and just every single time they always wanted to follow a constellation. Chinese, they follow the Big Dipper with the Beidou Qixing and the cult of the Big Dipper, consciousness point from humanity, apparently. But it all has something. Why were they out there looking for changes in the heavens? Because they understood a frequency change out there that affected stars in the visual spectrum meant that same electrical vibration would come in and affect our star. And we're just down the chain, literally down the chain. So it's not just us with the effects. Can you imagine planets in other star systems that are already being affected far more greatly than we are? Because that electrical disturbance and down flow, or that constriction at a Z point coming in on our current flow here, they're already going through and have already gone through and passed, and then it's rebounded itself, because they're looking at, I think there was about 1,200 stars that disappeared. They didn't disappear. The current flow into them turned down the luminescence.
Mhm.
Now just wait for them. They'll pop back up again. And look at Betelgeuse. There's all these stories about Betelgeuse glowing more dimly. And then they're talking about other places that are supernovas, like, oh, look at the light just started. You can see it again. Well, they're all describing the same thing of the current flow went down and then it charged back up again. And then suddenly the plasma sheath on the stars further afield started to glow more brightly. Luminescence increases or decreases based on this current flow. And I encourage everybody out there to look at the electric universe and Thunderbolts project and the way they explain it with these Birkeland currents. Again, a scientist explained all this, and again, you can't talk about polarities rolling in on this and being affected by outside. What? Anybody that comes up with the true science to explain the cycles is always vilified. But to wind it back to the beginning of the program, these UN body and these governmental bodies, they have far more information. They have 500 years of data of pillaging across our world. Most of the good stuff's in repositories and private libraries. Yes. The codices and different, things that would have been taken back by ship. That understanding of these cycles is not in public hands, it's in private hands. And you can see why some of these, dynasties have been in power for thousands, plural of years. They understand the cycles. They understand the electromagnetism of birthing into a low magnetic field will allow a human lifespan to be over 100 years. So they call it gravitational birthing. And they're all about this into the esoteric circles. They're always looking for the dates, the pregnancies to get the fetus to a point of birth in a low magnetic field is a well-studied science among these elitist groups. And if we're coming into a 400-year low and we're stepping off of a cycle that was semi-low anyway, coming into a 400-year low, this is the thing that they've been waiting for to celebrate anyway, to be able to birth into. Can you imagine a 400 or 2,000-year low in solar activity, which would mean electromagnetism at a 400 or a 2,000-year low? Birthing into that, you would live to be 120 or 150 years old on the human lifespan. And I encourage everybody to look higher. When you're really at solar maximum, the birth, your average lifespan is very much shortened compared to be birthed in and born at a low in solar activity. So all these things wind up. Why do I say that? Well, they understand the cycles far better than most. And they understand that we're at the end of the current era's cycle. Food is the most important thing. If you don't have food, you don't have a civilization. So if you can control the food, you can literally control the birth of a new civilization. And that's what gives me so hopefulness. I can control my own food to a point. I can grow food like Celeste can. So we are part of that solution. And you should be too. Be very grateful and just start to learn as much as you can about growing food, raising animals, chickens, protein sources, fats, oils. You're going to need it all. But once you're able to produce that, you are part of the new world because you can control food also. That's the thing that's going to be the most highly controlled, not oil, not energy, not uranium. It's going to be food. And that's why that's how it's wrapping all the way back to selling. Why do they want to sell by a molecule or something? It's all control of the food supply.
Yeah, that's a starvation diet. They just want depopulation.
Thanks, man. The fields on a molecule, not.
Yeah, you wouldn't be off the couch. But yeah, they do know, and they have known for a long time. So when are you expecting us to go into the 400-year low?
Right now, as we step off of this one. So we're in solar cycle 25, which, by the way, is ending 3 years early. But so many astrophysicists out there had called that it was going to end way early because based on the cycles that we're seeing in the solar peaks, you get a double peak. Usually you'll get the high peak and then a low peak, but this one was a low peak and then a high peak. So it's the opposite of the normal peak cycle. And then when they saw that, they're like, oh, that happens about every 400 years. And then we step off. And that's the signal that we're stepping off into a much lower solar output phase.
And I haven't been
Immediately, right now, as we come into this winter, for sure you'll notice changes. As much as the summer seemed to be very bizarre in terms of heating and hot places and weirdness and blocking patterns and like hurricanes in the wrong places in this thing, convection patterns were very different. There's a lot of water in the atmosphere from the Hunga Tonga eruption. You're going to see the same thing with this winter pattern wrap up here. It might, we're already getting just incredible low temperatures here in Tennessee. There's like really low and very out of the season. It's like 2 months early for this kind of temperature ranges that we're seeing in the evenings here. 21 degrees Fahrenheit already. I mean, that was weeks ago. Something's off already. You're going to watch these winters get incredibly cold, excuse me, and a little more unexplainable. So just understand it's a cycle. We've lived through it before. Celeste, you hit it on the head. We've been through things far, far, far more intense than this.
Yes.
But we're all still here. There's 8 billion people left. So we know as long as you can prepare and produce food, you shall still get through this crisis. And I wouldn't even call it a crisis. You know, in Chinese, the word crisis is opportunity and danger. Those two characters put together are crisis. So being part of the solution and looking at the last million years or even 400,000 years, we've come through this, even through maximum glaciation when you were squeezed to the equatorial bands, and we still survived this. We've still come out and we've still remultiplied to 8 billion people. So it's survivable as long as you know the reasons it's happening. And when you look at the media and the government behaving the way they do, you just understand they're pivoting. The more information they get, the more they need to pivot, but they need to distract the populace without causing a global panic before the actual real difficulties are here. And I'm not really on the side of that. I think everybody should have been told where we had a good 20 years to get our society ready, get your neighborhoods ready, get your cities ready, become completely as much off grid as you could. But then you would have, taken away from the corporate dollar and they wouldn't have been able to prepare for continuity of government because nobody would be working. And you got to weigh the balance of this. Would you tell the people or would you not? I don't know.
I've always been a fierce advocate of like civil defense and preparedness, and of course I work for FEMA, so I would be. I has never bought in to keep the people in the dark. I remember one time there was a cyclone that was going to hit the Pacific Northwest, and I was called in. I was supposed to be meeting with some beekeepers from Belarus, and I was really excited about it. They said, "Oh, you got to come in. We're activating at 5, then we're activating at 3, then we're activating at 1." Then it was noon, then it was get yourself in here. And I come in there and there's like 100 men in black in the emergency operations center. And they had already started evacuating nursing homes. And it was the type of evacuation that they wanted the whole Pacific Northwest evacuated and you would not be allowed back. They wanted it for people like Bill Gates and, rich and famous. And that's kind of, in a way, what Montana has become. But you know what? This is why you can't buy into everything they said, because it was supposed to be devastating. The dikes were all supposed to blow. Everything was supposed to be underwater. Every single thing hit. The weirdest thing about that operation or event was my boss goes, "And let me know when you hear about the whale." And I thought, we were 3 days into the event. I thought, we would tease, I go, "There's
Where's
not
the
a
whale?
whale.
Where's the
There's
whale?
not a whale." And so I answer the phone in the EOC, and it was the tribes, and they go, "Oh, by the way, we spotted your gray whale in the river." And I went, that was about the weirdest thing, but everyone was amazed, and they were kind of agitated because everything held. And there's things you can do, like my ancestors, when the mini ice age in Europe and Scotland, they grew apricots against stone
Yeah.
walls, and that took the heat during the day, kept it from getting the fruit from freezing at night, and that's how they paid their laird their taxes or their due or whatever. So just think outside the box. There's things that you can do, but just don't sit there and wait, because it is happening and you can't afford to waste a minute. Okay, thank you, everyone. This is Celeste from the Celeste Report, and we will see you the next time.